Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take sources you send us, often these really dense documents, and we try to unpack them together.
Yeah, pull out the key insights, kind of give you the highlights so you feel like you've got a handle on it without maybe wading through everything yourself.
Exactly. A shortcut to being informed, you could say.
So today we're diving into a source titled Christos Avatar, Favian, a comprehensive expose.pdf. It's quite a detailed look at this online figure.
Right. Favian. He runs Christos AvatarTV, presents himself as Anuhazi Christos Equion. You might have heard his greeting, your star brother.
hmm The expose paints a picture of someone who came from, well, in cult background, searching before finding what he now calls the truth.
Which he identifies as the Emerald Order freedom teachings, originally from Ashayana.
Yeah, and he frames it as this big personal awakening, finding the real path after exploring other things. It's a common narrative structure.
It really is that journey from darkness to light, finding the answer.
So our mission today is to get a feel for these teachings as Favian presents them, understand his methods, and see how he fits into this bigger picture of online spiritual movements.
Okay, let's start with his reach. How big is this operation? The expose mentions a pretty significant online presence.
Oh, definitely. The main hub is the Christos Avatar TV YouTube channel. As of, April 2025, it had over 92,000 subscribers.
Yeah.
That's a lot of people tuning in.
It absolutely is. And the content is, well, it's a real mix, isn't it?
It covers a huge range. Spiritual awakening, ascension, starseeds, indigos,
Aliens, secret space programs, God, angels, fallen angels.
Anunnaki, reptilians, hybrids, Lemuria, Atlantis, forbidden history. I mean, it hits all the major notes.
And it's all presented under this umbrella of Ashayana Emerald Order MCEO, Law of One teachings.
Right. And he's not just on YouTube. The expose says he's active on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, sharing shorter clips, visuals.
Or those AI-generated Lyran starseed art images.
Yeah.
Very eye-catching, very modern.
And effective, it seems. The source mentions a Reddit user actually citing Favian alongside Ashayana as potentially life-changing. So he's definitely making an impact, getting noticed.
So let's dig into the teachings themselves. He's very upfront that these aren't his original ideas, right?
Correct. He explicitly attributes them to Ashayana Kelantic science, the freedom teachings. He says they're not from Earth.
Which is quite the statement. A record of advanced knowledge about a 15-dimensional universe, apparently.
Yeah, that's the foundational claim. From there, he covers concepts like humanity's cosmic origins, our multi-dimensional anatomy.
And this whole narrative of a struggle, right, between guardian forces and fallen forces playing out in Earth's hidden history.
Exactly. Things like the Lauren Elohim, ancient galactic wars, the influence of Anunnaki and Draconians on human DNA, this idea of a phantom matrix. It's incredibly detailed cosmology, all from Dean.
And a huge part of it is DNA activation, isn't it? This idea we have dormant 12-strand DNA.
Yes, linked to these guardian ETs. Activating it is key to spiritual liberation, to ascension. That promise of unlocking potential is, well, it's powerful.
Now, here's where it gets a bit controversial, maybe. His stance on things like tarot cards.
Yes. The expose points out he calls them far from harmless. He claims they connect users to trickster entities.
Which is quite a strong claim, especially within the broader New Age community where those tools are common.
It is. He argues they divert people from connecting with their inner Christos, that inner divine spark.
So his alternative is, what, focusing inward?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Cultivating that inner Christos connection, aligning with eternal life currents. It's a very specific path he advocates, distinct from more eclectic approaches.
And his content ranges from these dense, almost academic lectures on the 15D time matrix or Atlantis.
But more practical stuff like guided meditations and these ascension protocols, so theory and practice.
But always circling back to Ashayana, quoting her, presenting her work as the ultimate truth.
Yes, the source material is consistently referenced. What's also interesting is how he integrates the secret space program narrative.
Right, weaving that into the Emerald Order cosmology, trying to create a unified theory of, well, everything. Angels, aliens, Atlantis, SSP.
It definitely adds another layer of intrigue for people interested in those topics. It promises to connect a lot of dots.
Okay, so that's the message. But how is it funded? The expose is pretty clear this is a business.
Yes, Christos Avatar Corporation, registered in Las Vegas. It's definitely structured as a commercial enterprise.
And Patreon seems key, this Christos family membership.
With multiple tiers, right? From Angel at $9 a month up to Rishi at, $86.50.
And you get different perks. Lower tiers get things like an exclusive diagram, time matrix alien races, and access to a private Discord.
Higher tiers unlock more. Exclusive live streams, deleted scenes, maybe videos YouTube might take down, behind-the-scenes vlogs, and these Emerald Order video workshops and articles.
So the deeper you want to go, the more you pay.
Essentially, yes. And the exposé mentions his pitch is quite direct, that Patreon support is necessary, it keeps him alive. It links financial support directly to his ability to continue.
Beyond subscriptions, there's an Etsy shop, too. And Nuhazi artworks.
Selling New Age-type merchandise? Fantasy and sci-fi art prints, around $15 or so. Things like that Lyran feline alien art.
But also some very high-priced items, right? Crystals and crystal skulls.
Yeah, that stood out. A rose quartz skull for nearly $500, lapis lazuli, around $274, and an amethyst one, over $2,000.
Wow, okay. And marketed with specific metaphysical claims.
That's what the exposé suggests. Plus an affiliate link for one of those iTerracare terahertz wand healing devices.
So subscriptions, merch, high-end crystals, affiliate marketing. What else?
Direct PayPal donations are accepted, and presumably standard YouTube ad revenue and maybe channel memberships too. Seems like a multi-pronged approach.
And the free content likely funnels people towards the paid stuff.
That's often how these models work, isn't it? Offer value, build trust, then provide pathways for deeper engagement, which usually involves payment.
So the conclusion is that pretty much everything has a price tag, raising that classic question: spiritual service or business model?
Or perhaps a blend of both. But the emphasis on monetization is definitely highlighted as a key aspect of the operation. It's something for potential followers to be aware of.
Now, how closely does all this stick to the original Achiana Dean material? He credits her, but are there differences?
The exposé suggests it's largely derivative, and he does acknowledge that, positioning himself as an unofficial teacher.
So someone familiar with Dean's Voyagers books, for example, would recognize the core concepts.
Absolutely. The 15D matrix, Guardians versus Fallen, DNA templating, ascension mechanics, the specific terminology like inner Christos, MCEO, Law of One. It's all straight from Dean's playbook. He even uses her specific title, Guardian Speaker 1, Yasha Ashiana.
So on the surface, it seems consistent.
Largely, yes. But the exposé points out some potential, maybe subtle, divergences or tensions.
Like what?
Well, one thing is mixing paradigms. Dean's chelotic science was very specific, very complex. Favian seems to blend it more readily with broader New Age concepts or UFO lore that wasn't necessarily part of the original package.
You mean like using terms like 5D more casually, or really leaning into Starseed and Indigo labels, or heavily featuring the secret space program?
Exactly. Those might resonate with a wider online audience, but they weren't necessarily central tenets or framed the same way in Dean's original work. Blending them in could potentially create inconsistencies or, I suppose, simplify the original message.
Does he selectively focus on certain aspects?
The exposé suggests, maybe, a potential focus on the more sensational elements, aliens, Atlantis, fast DNA activation, perhaps with less emphasis on Dean's later, more complex, and frankly sometimes bleaker teachings about timeline wars or the fall of man.
Or the whole controversy around Dean herself stopping public teaching. Does he address that?
It's unclear from the source if he tackles those thornier issues, which leads to the next point, lineage.
Meaning Dean hasn't publicly endorsed him.
Correct. He's self-appointed in that sense. And the exposé mentions a blogger pointing out he uses Dean's diagrams directly, perhaps without adding substantial new interpretation. So original followers might question his authority or depth of understanding.
And are there inconsistencies within his own material?
The exposé highlights the potential contradiction we touched on earlier, warning against tarot while selling expensive crystals and frequency wands.
Right. The only acceptable external tools seem to be the ones he sells.
That's how it appears. And also, this tension between preaching the law of one and unity while potentially fostering an in-group dynamic, we have the real truth, which can feel exclusionary, mirroring maybe some criticisms of Dean's earlier community structure.
It's a tricky balance, that sense of having special knowledge versus promoting universal unity.
Definitely. It's a recurring theme in many spiritual groups.
Okay, so the exposé then shifts tone quite a bit. There's a section titled Roast. That sounds critical.
It is. This part directly addresses perceived inconsistencies and red flags. The gloves come off a bit here.
Like the recycled teachings rebranded guru point.
Yeah, it argues he's essentially repackaging Dean's decades-old work, questioning the originality even with attribution, and contrasting his monetization level with the original source's approach. It raises ethical questions about profiting from another system so heavily.
And the paywall of enlightenment, that targets the Patreon model.
Precisely. Comparing it to an RPG where you pay to level up spiritually, it questions if genuine liberation should be behind tiered paywalls, especially when it seems some of that paid content might be repurposed from Dean's original workshops.
Then the critique about the Etsy shop, all that glitters, is sold.
Focusing on that contradiction again, warning against tarot, selling pricey crystals, suggesting the profit motive might be guiding which tools are deemed safe or beneficial.
There's also a point about inflated cosmic ego.
Yeah, looking at the presentation style, the sacred online space, calling followers holy ones, the almost press release language about state-of-the-art spiritual development. The exposé suggests it projects a kind of self-importance that warrants scrutiny.
And finally, red flags and echoes of cultishness. That's a strong phrase.
It is. The source is careful not to label it a cult, but it points out elements often associated with high-demand groups. Secret knowledge for paying members, and us versus them potential, monetized loyalty, non-falsifiable claims, recycling common conspiracy themes, drawing parallels to figures like Good or Wilcock.
So it's flagging patterns that observers often find concerning in these kinds of online communities.
Exactly. It's asking the reader, the listener, you, to consider these elements critically when evaluating the whole picture.
To bring in more context, the exposé compares Favian to figures in the Secret Space Program community. That's interesting.
It is, because they occupy similar territory, fringe spirituality, ufology, conspiracy, but with key differences.
Like the source of their stories, Favian relies on Dean, while SSP figures claim personal experience.
Right. Favian has an attributional narrative, inheriting a pre-built structure. SSP figures like Good or Danaean claim first-hand accounts, which can lead to more contradictions between them, or stories evolving. Remember, Good admitting parts were creative intellectual property.
That definitely changes the nature of the claims and the type of proof expected.
Absolutely. Favian's is spiritual teaching, taken more on faith within its own cosmology. SSP claims often sound more material, physical, but lack tangible evidence. Different burdens of proof, really.
And the complexity. Keylontic science is dense, but Favian inherits that structure. SSP narratives can be messier.
More fluid, yeah. Subject to change, disagreements. David's baseline is stable because it's based on Dean's work, though you wonder what happens if Dean releases new material that contradicts him.
What about the communities themselves? Different focus.
Seems like it. Favian draws more spiritual seekers, self-improvement focus. SSP communities often focus more on disclosure, ET politics, conspiracy angles. The SSP world can be quite fractious too.
And visually. Favian uses that AI cosmic art, spiritual vibes mixed with sci-fi. SSP is more street sci-fi, sometimes military aesthetic.
Yeah, different branding. Favian and his teacher, SSP figures often as whistleblowers or experiencers.
But the monetization tactics, there are parallels there.
Big time. Patreon, merch, donations. Favian's model mirrors tactics seen across the SSP fringe landscape. The exposé mentions Wilcock's $333 courses, Good's trademarks, Danaean's paywalls. Similar criticisms about profiting arise in both spheres.
Though the framing might differ, Favian's educational mission versus SSP's funding research or just selling products.
Right, and the impact goals differ too. SSP often aims for societal disclosure, while Favian focuses on personal ascension. But the audiences likely overlap quite a bit.
So Favian is kind of bridging esoteric spirituality and exopolitics, maybe like Wilcock tried to do.
That's a fair comparison the exposé hints at. He's carving out a niche within that broader ecosystem, using similar tools but with his specific Dean-based content.
Okay, so wrapping up the exposé's final thoughts, how does it position Favian overall?
As a complex figure, part student of Dean, part content creator, part entrepreneur, and, depending on your perspective, potentially a charlatan. It really highlights this ongoing, deep human hunger for cosmic answers.
And it puts him alongside those SSP mythmakers, structured doctrine versus personal stories, but similar showmanship, similar business models.
The core message coming through is the need for discernment. Really critical thinking when you encounter these kinds of narratives online.
Because the truth of the claims themselves, 15 dimensions, DNA activation, ancient aliens, that remains, unproven, doesn't it?
Entirely.
Yeah.
But the patterns around how these narratives are built, shared, and monetized, and why people are drawn to them, that is becoming much clearer. The advice is simple. Proceed with open eyes, proceed with caution.
Which brings us to the end of this particular deep dive into Christos, Avatar, and Favian. It's certainly a lot to think about.
It really is. You see this blend of spiritual teaching, very polished personal branding, and this undeniable commercial engine driving it.
So the question we'd leave you with is this. In today's world with information and maybe misinformation everywhere online, what does the emergence and success of figures like Favian tell us about how people are searching for meaning, for esoteric knowledge?
And maybe more importantly, how do you navigate that? How do you decide what's authentic, what's helpful, what's potentially harmful in this incredibly crowded field of alternative ideas?
It's something worth reflecting on, maybe considering the sources you engage with and why.
Well, thank you for joining us as we explored this expose. As always, if you come across sources you think we should dive into, please send them our way.
Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep your critical thinking sharp.